Thank you everyone for joining. And as you know, or may not know, November is Indigenous Heritage Month. And there are a lot of modalities, rituals, tools within the spiritual and metaphysical community. And a lot of times we or other people might practice these rituals without thinking about where they come from. But we believe it's our job here at the Happy Healing Shop to learn to appreciate and respect the roots of our favorite healing modalities and learn where they come from and what cultures they come from as well. So tonight we have an amazing guest speaker from the Indigenous community who will be sharing her gifts, talents, and expertise, as well as her journey of what it was like to get to where she is today. And my name is Trang Pham Nguyen. I'm co-founder of the Happy Healing Shop, where we help people on their spiritual journey through community events like this. And also we have a lot of free resources on our site and have a lot of online courses such as energy healing, develop your psychic and intuition, and turning your spiritual hobby into a business. So we're also launching a membership next spring. So it's similar to a Patreon where there's going to be more events and exclusive perks for the community. And also we'll be having upcoming events free to the public, which I'm going to include in the chat below. Our guest for tonight is a Hopi shaman, spiritual teacher, and speaker. She is Native American of the Kaibab Paiute and Hopi descent. A clan member of the Badger and Butterfly clan, she incorporates her techniques based on her cultural and spiritual wisdom into her work to bring harmony to the mind, body, and spirit. Her lectures are about Native American wisdom that can bring balance to a modern lifestyle and empower individuality for a deeper spiritual path to life. Please give a warm welcome to De Alva Ward.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for even coming to speak with us. I'm just going to pin you right now to make sure that you're on the screen. Okay, so it should be both of us on the screen right now. And I'm also going to hit Instagram Live because we're being ambitious today. Okay, it says we are live. Perfect. So De Alva, can you start off by telling a little backstory about yourself, about your tribe, how you grew up in your community, and kind of like your journey to becoming a shaman and energy healer?
Okay, great. I am Hopi. I was raised Hopi majority of my life. It wasn't until 2005 that I started stepping into my Kaibab Paiute side. So traditionally in Hopi culture, when a man marries a woman, the man goes to the woman's reservation, and they leave their wherever they're from. So my grandfather's full Paiute, Kaibab Paiute, and my grandmother's full Hopi. So when they got married, he left his tribe and became part of the tribe with my grandmother. But when she passed, he went back to his reservation. And I, as a caregiver for both of my grandparents, it was that time to take him back to his reservation. So I started really getting into my culture on that side. But really, my gifts, I have all the gifts. Claircognizance is the one that I have the most. I really had that one since I was very young. So it's easier for me. I just call it the knowing. Like I know things about people, not always for myself. And that's a misconception that a lot of people have, is when they have these types of gifts, that they don't necessarily see it for themselves because they can't get information for themselves. But you can get information from other people much easily than you would for yourself. And it's kind of the way spirit teaches people, and that's the way that I was taught when I was young, is that spirit connects to us. And I honestly had no clue that a lot of people didn't know connections of spirits, because in Hopi culture, we're born and taught spirituality from the time we were born. That's something that has always been known to me growing up. My parents were divorced, so obviously I was raised by my grandparents. And on both sides of my culture was just really embracing the Hopi culture. But it was really difficult for me because both of my grandparents were boarding school. students, and they really had their culture pulled from them, their language pulled from them. They spoke English. So my Hopi reservation is here in Arizona. I'm from Old Arribe, Arizona, and it's near Prophecy Rock. And we would go to the reservation. I still have a home out there. I still have family out there. And we would go and do ceremonies at different times of the seasons of the year. We would harvest. We would still do all the traditional stuff, but we lived in a city. And that was just where my grandparents, chose to live. But because they were still boarding school in Arizona up until 1992, I believe, the Indian Steel School was here in Arizona, and they stopped functioning around the early 90s. So my grandparents were actually chose to be a hub for Indigenous students from her reservation. So when they came down for boarding school, they would come to the house and they would stay, they would have a place to eat, different things like that. So I was really taught the white man's way, but I was also taught the traditional ways. And growing up, it was always very difficult and challenging for me, because in Hopi way, the traditional gifts of healing, seeing, things like that was always done with men. It was not something women did. So being young, at a very young age, I'm asking questions about things I've already known and seen on uncles when they went down into the kiva, when ceremony was taking place. I knew things about a lot of things. And when I was little, I'm asking all sorts of inquisitive questions that I should not know. So I ended up getting initiated a lot earlier than I should have. And it was because I was asking questions I shouldn't know. Little did they know is where the information was coming from was I'm getting it from them, their aura, their energy. I would have flashes and understanding of knew what was happening. And it was being suppressed because I was not male, I was female. It wasn't accepted. It was something that I had to suppress for myself. And it was a struggle because I never could embrace my individuality with my own people, nor could I embrace it when I was living in the city, because I went to school with predominantly white students. So I was 1 out of 2 students in the school that was Native American. So I didn't belong in the white man's world, and I didn't belong in the Native world, because even the children out there looked at me as white because I could speak English, I dressed differently. So I never belonged. And there was a period in my own life where I rejected my Native culture around my teenage years. It was right after a ceremony that I had taken, and I literally got picked on and beat up because the kids out there just did not like me. I was white. Came home and I told myself I never want to be Native American again. I did not like what I saw in the mirror. And what I did was I cut off all my long hair and I dyed it blonde. And we all know what happens to brown hair. When you try to dye it blonde, it turns orange. So I had orange hair. It didn't turn blonde. And I really did not like myself at that time. And so I had covered all the mirrors, and I told myself I'm going to try my hardest to be white so I could fit in. And I went through a period of time in my teenage years rebelling against my Native American culture. So I married a non-Native. He's white. I have 3 kids, so they're all half Native American. I was very lucky and fortunate. My husband was in the military, so the diversity was very common. And so being able to tap into very different cultures. And I also led my path into a spiritual journey to where I went from conform religions to being Native American culture, embracing that, to Christianity, to Buddhism, Tao. I really engulfed a lot of different spiritual pathways in my 20s and 30s, searching for my identity and myself. Little did I know I was always in the right place at the right time. At that time, I thought I was indecisive. I didn't know who I was, but I was really understanding that there came a path where I was supposed to touch all those different conform religions so that I could do the work that I'm doing today. But it wasn't until my grandmother had passed away and my grandfather was still strong enough to go down the Colorado River, and he wanted to go so bad before he passed. And I told him I would take him, and I went with a bunch of elders. And because I rejected myself from the Hopi side and we started going back to the Paiute side, I learned the Paiute women out there were healers as well. And it was acceptable there. So I'm like, yay, you know, a part of my culture, I can embrace that. I can be accepted, and I can feel okay in my own self to embrace my spiritual gifts and the talents that I have and not be ashamed of it. But then I also was struggling with, but I was raised Hopi in the cultural belief systems. And when I went down that river with all those elders, they, you know, they knew, they felt it. And when I went down that Colorado River, they were telling me, pay attention as we go. And by the 4th or 5th day, they said, have you noticed yourself down here? And I said, well, not really. I'm understanding the cultures. I understand where it comes from, but for myself, I'm struggling with which side to choose. Do I continue embracing my Hopi side because that's what I was raised with, or do I continue to embrace the Paiute side because I'm a woman and I can be a healer and I can be okay with myself? And they sat me down around the fire in the Grand Canyon and made me walk up to the waters and had a conversation with me. They go, do you notice your identity when you're here? Do you hear the spirits talk to you? And I said, yes, I hear the songs. I hear them talking. And they talked the language and they didn't understand, because that was one thing that my grandparents never taught me was my own language, because they didn't want me to be picked on like they did. They didn't want me to be treated badly because I spoke another language. So they made me speak English all the time. So coming down that river, the elders had said, you're Hopi on one side of the water. On the right side, you're Paiute, but your true identity is neither side. Your true identity is the water. That's who you are. Because in that water, you embrace both sides. So you don't belong to either one. And that's when I realized I don't have to claim the traditional ways or from both sides and try to be one or the other, but find a balance in both. And after I came out of that, I started really embracing my talents and gifts and started doing the healing work for non-natives. That's where that started to step out and started sharing it, because once I embraced myself, Spirit was guiding me to share the wisdom with a lot of people. But it was fearful to expose that, because Hopi prophecy is something that I speak a lot about, but it's something only the men speak about. So by sharing the prophecies and the wisdoms of my culture, because at that time the elders were still living, was very taboo. We're taught in Hopi ways never to share our traditional pathways or spiritual customs with non-natives, because that is participating in the downfall of the heart of the Hopi people. And this is something that is sacred to us, and the more we share it, the less power that has, and it's a detriment to our way of living. And so that was something that I had to fight and struggle with within myself to share it. But there's something within me that said, there are so many people out in the world who are so drawn and connected to Native American culture. And in my teachings and lectures and my travels where I go, there's so many people who come to me and say, I've been to the reservation. I just hear and I know things, and I'm so embarrassed or I'm so uncomfortable with embracing the Native American ways because I'm not Native or I'm not from that culture. And one of the things I can relate to is I never felt like I belonged either. And a lot of people didn't know that about my story. So a lot of people gravitate to me because we're mirrors. You know, some of the situations and traumatic events in our lives happen to us for a reason, because we're supposed to help other people down the road with what we've learned. We share our wisdom with other people. So when I lecture, I tell people, you feel Native American, then your soul's Native American. You don't have to convince anybody. You don't have to do ancestry.com either to get a piece of paper that says you're 1/10 of a Native American or any form of indigenous culture. If your soul believes that, then that's all you have to convince is yourself. You don't need a certificate. You don't need to take training or classes to be able to call yourself this connectedness to Native American or indigenous ways. You know, there is that. You'll meet across a lot of Native people who are out there that still believe in the traditional ways where this is wrong, this is taboo, selling classes or workshops or speaking about these things is bad. But there's also those people out there who are just like regular people. We have good people and bad people. We have actual Native Americans who monopolize on this financial situation that somebody is wanting to go out to Hopi. We get that a lot. People have heard of Hopi prophecies, they read all the books, and they want to go out there. And there are Hopi people out there that take advantage of that and charge crazy amounts of money to be able to do things. They will create a ceremony. And a lot of Native people won't do the ceremonies in the correct way because the elders have taught, if you're going to do that, you don't do it fully, completely, because they are not of the Hopi people. So if you're going to teach it, then you teach it in a way of not fully disclosing everything. So they may teach you a portion, but they won't teach you the full thing. And that's their way of keeping it sacred without crossing that line. Or they do storytelling, will only storytell to a certain degree, but they don't share the full underlying story of the whole thing. So you're never fully getting the full story. So even the writings from the 1960s into the 1970s that we have hard copies of Hopi prophecy and culture and the things that we can read on social media now, it's also a misinterpretation. Not all of it is of truth. So there are things that are left out. There are things that when they're translated, they are translated not clearly, because in Hopi culture, men speak a specific way and women speak a specific way. So in the wording, we have two different words for different things and they have different meanings. And even in the different meanings, it's in the sound of how we say it that has that underlining meaning to what things are said. And that's why we sing the songs. When we sing songs, there is a deeper meaning than just simply saying it. So a lot of information is out there now in social media, but it is very unclear where the line is, what is true, what is not true. And I get that question a lot, is if I want to learn more about Native American culture, whether it's my culture or any other culture, how do I know that the person who's teaching me is truth? You don't. The only way that I tell people to trust in that position when they're getting educated or they're going through a ceremony, you must feel it within yourself. That's all that's important to you. If it feels right to you, if it resonates with you, then it's right for you. And if it doesn't, then simply walk away. So my journey led me to say, why not teach those who want to learn? Because there is a need out there. And I've never been one to walk the straight line. I've always been the one to make my own pathway. And as comfortable that is, I tell people, if you're that leader or you're in that position as a teacher, the pathways are never ahead of you. You have to create it. And as we're evolving in humanity, which is part of the prophecy too, is that we are all evolving as human beings. And why not our religious backgrounds? Why not our cultures that we come from? Why not humanity of who we are as individuals start to evolve in its own? And that's why I call myself a modern shaman, because I respect the traditional ways that I was raised with, but I teach it in a way that is more modern, because we live in homes. You know, you don't live on the reservation anymore. And a lot of the things that's being taught in the traditional ways can't fit a modern lifestyle. But there are ways to adapt to it. There's ways to evolve it. Simply doing certain ceremonies, you can do it at the same time, but maybe you do it a little differently than normal. So there are ceremonies that are dying out from Hopi reservations now, that the elders who did carry those sacred ceremonies have passed, and they're no longer leaving them to the next generation, because they look at the generation as being flooded with white man's ways, and they look at it as they're tainted. Therefore, those traditional ways have ended. And that's the traditional mind of the elders, how they believed. And a lot of the younger generation says, but we need to evolve. And it was perfect for them at that time because they always lived on the reservation. But a majority of people, after a certain period of time, started getting educated and living the white man's ways and embracing that way. Why not embrace both? And that's why I'm here to help teach that, as much as anybody's willing to listen. So that led me to my pathway.
Yeah, what an interesting perspective, because online there's a lot of debate about what's right, what's wrong, but here you are going through a very long, interesting journey to probably go through a lot of hardships to also be able to relate to your clients, but also at the same time knowing that you said we are evolving, the world's evolving, and where's that kind of like borderline of where we mix or like the traditional versus modern, or adapt to the modern without losing everything. So I think that's really a different, fresh perspective that I've seen. And so in terms of as in you do modern shamanism, or you're a modern shaman, I know that some people will say some people may argue you have to be indigenous in order to be called a shaman. But then there's other people that do shamanistic rituals, or they do shamanistic energy healing. And so where is the borderline in your perspective where it is okay versus where it is cultural appropriation?
For me, even the word shaman, in my culture, we don't say shaman, we say medicine person. Well, traditionally I say medicine man, but I say medicine person because, again, the evolution of who we are as identity. There are even people out there that are not fully identifying as masculine or feminine. They're encompassed as both energies. So medicine person is more appropriate nowadays to be able to say that. But I use the word shaman because, again, through trying to educate a lot of people, the words that I use, it's not gonna, be sought out on social media. Nobody's gonna find me. I mean, I can put medicine woman, but it's not gonna be picked up very commonly. If I put medicine, Hopi shaman, that gets picked up very quickly, so people can find me. So it's a search engine thing of why I use it. But shaman comes from a different type of tribal connection, but it is basically the same thing. Shaman is a person who can step into multiple dimensions and do healing work on the body through mind, body, spirit with dimensional work. I do that. And I look at people do medicine work as like doctors. So there are primary care physicians, and then you have people who specialize in podiatry and different types of medicine field. For me, I view all shamans or medicine people as we all know the basics of the foundations of the mind, body, spirit from whatever indigenous cultures that they connect with or are drawn with. And it's not something that can be learned over a weekend or a certification. I would be very cautious with people who are being taught that, because just in any type of energy work, you learn the training, but your training doesn't end on the weekend. You must still continuously utilize what you've learned over a year's period of time, because there are things that you will not learn through your teaching until you actually do the work. So I do get people who connect with me and can give me the resume of certifications or teachings or who taught them or who taught what. And me personally is, show me what you can do. show me the basics. And I usually ask that criteria with people who want to learn from me or me to teach them something. I have to know that they have the basics, the foundations of protection of themselves, the understanding of the earth energies, and the understanding of the body energies. And every medicine person should know the anatomy of the body. If they don't know the anatomy of the body, then you're a beginner. So even like a doctor, when a doctor has to do its residency, you still get all this education for 8 years, 12 years, depending on what field you're getting in. You're still are brand new, you're still fresh. And so you must do your residency with somebody. So even if you're taught and you're being taken the classes, if you're being taught by somebody else who's been doing this for a long period of time, then there is some understanding that that person is being trained properly. But again, you have to trust yourself in what the person is experiencing. I have no judgment on whoever's calling themselves a shaman or doing that type of work, but I do caution it because it is very technical. It's not like a typical traditional like Reiki energy. Reiki energy is very common nowadays and is very acceptable, and it's very harmless. But when you're doing medicine work or shaman work, it can be harmful to the psyche. It can be harmful to the physical body, and it can be harmful to the spiritual body. So doing this type of work can cause somebody to have mental breakdowns. It can cause physical pain. The energy that's coming from the medicine person isn't necessarily always like Reiki. It's universal. It's coming from your environment outside of you. And so it can't cause harm to anybody. When a medicine person is doing work, it's coming from us and we're channeling it from many different places. And so the energies that are coming, you have to understand where it's coming from. So if you're going, anybody goes to any type of medicine person or shaman, they must ask them as they're going, if it's their first time with them, ask them to tell you why they're doing this. Always, just like you're going to any doctor, ask your doctor questions. Because if you don't, then you'll find out that they may not even know what they're doing. They're just trusting what spirit, again, no disrespect to anybody else, but there is that in-depth of spirituality that it's all of the light, it's all of energy. But the reality is we're a third dimensional polarity, which we have negative and positive energies of this planet. We have positive energies and we have harmful energies. And depending on where the energy is coming from, if you're looking to the universe and saying, I'm having spirits come in and help me do this work, but you can't understand where it's coming from and how is it manipulating somebody else's healing, or how is it taking stuff out of somebody's body, and if it's coming out, where is it going? And if it's coming out, is there going to be a hole there? Is it my aura going to be Swiss cheese? Which it is if somebody's pulling stuff out of you, just like surgery. We cut your skin open and we take things out. Are they sewing it back up? Those are type of things when you go to a medicine person that you have to be very careful and mindful. If they're not willing to share with you what they're doing, then there is some error of caution that people must be understandable. But there are stuff when I teach students who do some sort of training with me, that there are beginning trainings of simple things that can't cause harm, that will teach them to understand the balance of everything so that they don't harm anybody or hurt anybody. Or I'm accessible when they start doing that work to be able to call me and say, hey, I'm having an issue. I did this, but I'm not quite sure if I should do that. Well, let's talk it through and, kind of help with that. So also somebody who has been only doing this for a couple of years, are they still in contact with their mentor who taught them? Because if you do it for the weekend, you're not necessarily in contact with them in case something happens. And you really need to have somebody who has been doing this for a long time to be there to assist you. So I don't judge anybody else who does this, who has that label. If you're comfortable with the person doing it, if they've helped you, then that's the right person for you.
Can you explain a little bit more about the services you offer, including shaman energy work healing, and also what type of people you recommend it for? Like, it could be people that are going through a life transition, health things, heartache, like, because for me, I didn't know what shamanism was before and what if it was the type of service for me.
So one of the main healing modalities that I've done, and I haven't done it since COVID has happened, is my shaman healing. And that one is very particular. I just don't have anybody who wants that session. That particular session is for somebody who has gone through therapy or has gone through their own healing with another modality, done some shadow work or whatever it is that they've been needing. But this type of work is for people who feel like they've done everything they could, exhausted their resources, but they feel like there's still that block. There's still something that will come to the surface when they're triggered that allows them not to move forward in their pathway. And when I have clients come to the session, I require them to at least give me 2 weeks in advance, because I do have to prep. I have to know the reasoning why they're coming, because I have to gather some of the herbs, because some of the herbs need to be fresh when I do that. I do fast for 3 days. So fasting, my family knows when I'm doing a medicine work is I don't eat any meals. I'll have, water or a green drink throughout those 3 days, but I don't eat the food. I don't watch TV. I don't put anything into my body that doesn't necessarily need to be in my body. I don't touch anybody for 3 days. So my husband isn't sleeping in the same bed with me. I'm not hugging anybody. I'm cleaning my energy field. That way, when I'm going into what I call outpatient surgery for the work that I do, is that I don't bring anything to that space. Because traditionally, any type of medicine work like this was always done from sunset to sunrise. They would chant, they would sing songs, they would do things over the person, and they would continuously do this all night. Well, it's unrealistic to do that for somebody who is non-native, and they would probably feel uncomfortable doing that for a long period of time. So I've shortened it to the very minimum to an hour and a half. And that's why I only take specific types of people who have had healing work of some sort, or they've gone to counseling and they've done this, because that takes away a certain part of the healing work that would be taking place during that all-night ceremony. So quickly taking stuff out of somebody's physical tissue, because muscle memory is in the physical body. And when we have muscle memory, our traumas, our sadness, our grief, if we don't deal with it, starts to stay embedded in our muscle tissue. So I look at people as a computer. I'm here to defragment. I'm here to go in as the computer tech and pull out things in their muscle tissue. A lot of them can be related to childhood trauma or some form of substance abuse, or people who've gone through cancer treatments, because with cancer treatments, there's so much radiation, chemicals that have been put in their body. So I'm pulling a lot of that stuff out of their body. So it is very different for many different people, but in that same situation, my body is bringing in another animal spirit, and I am actually working on the body with that energy. So it takes me a long time to prep my vessel so that I can withhold a spirit in my body that I've always worked with somebody. So for example, a hawk would come in with somebody who's had sexual trauma in the uterus, and I would be taking out muscle memory stuff from that, past stuff there. There, when it comes to substance abuse, it's different types of animals that come in that I work with that claw things out or rip things out, bear energy. I work with, and that's usually for substance abuse and things like that, or negative thinking, self-induced pain, those types of things that will come in. So my clients are people who've gone through some form of traumatic event, or they have had trauma from childhood or family issues, different ancestral issues, ancestral trauma. So maybe they didn't have it in their life, but it was trauma for their mother or trauma from their grandmother that came down from the womb into the body. So there's many different types of clients that will come in for sessions, for that particular sessions. And you know, I always have people have to write me an essay when they want this type of session. Anything, any physical issue, I ask people what type of physical issues you have, different things like that. So this is very a complex session for somebody. I don't go any longer than 3 hours. That's the longest I will go, because I have to hold these animals in there as I'm doing this type of work. And how I do it is I have a person laying on the table, and I clear their energy and I open it up, and I utilize these animal energies to come in and take things out. But after I've opened your aura and worked on it, I'm also closing the body's aura. As I tell people, it's like Neosporin. I'm sealing up your aura, but that's usually with the herbs that I'm using, that I'm sealing that up. And I tell people it's an in and out patient. I only do it in the morning, because then they have to go home, and I tell them, you go home and you just rest. So even for the client that's coming in, they are on restrictions. They can't eat any heavy meals for 24 hours before their session. No caffeine, a lot of water, and light meals. Because even if they come on my table and I'm taking the stuff out of their tissue, it can cause them to have diarrhea. It can cause them to feel nauseated. It can cause them to have heartburn. All these different types of things can happen to the physical body because I'm taking things out and I'm moving energy. I also get clients who've had curses or entities or attachments. I'm removing it that way as well. There is a criteria of questions that I will go through with the person to make sure that it is of truth, that they do know that they have something. I'm always, you know, cautious when somebody comes to me and says, well, I had a reading and somebody told me that I have an entity. And I asked them, well, how do you know that you have one? Well, somebody told me. Chances are you don't have an entity. It's just somebody telling you that. A lot of times, if there's an entity attachment, there is some form of physical pain or physical illness that comes with that. So there are things that I look out for in order to know what somebody needs for that particular session, but it's not for everybody. The other types of sessions I have are, I also do reading. So life purpose reading is one that I'm currently do, and that's helping people to understand their talents. So I usually show them 3 talents they have, their soul aspect of what they came into this world, that only that particular aspect is something that you were born with that will never ever change till the time that you pass, that you're calling. And then there are purposes of of your life that you will fulfill. And so I give you that type of information as the life purpose reading. And that's usually for somebody who's gone through transitions or changes in their life, whether it's divorce or feeling they want to change their job, or they're feeling a little lost or don't quite know where they belong. It's a life purpose reading that helps them understand who they are, why they've gone through certain things in their lives, and where they're going to be going and headed in that direction. It gives them direction. It gives them a purpose to move forward and help them understand what's going. So I do that one. Another one I do is a shadow reading, and I just started that this particular year. Shadow reading is to understand what created blocks within you that has prevented you from, feeling loved or feeling a purpose for yourself, or understanding your life path. Sometimes you know what your life path is, but you can't embrace it. And it's typically because there's some sort of shadow work that needs to be done. And I've done some of these types of readings and blended it into doing even businesses. You know, people who have businesses who have partnerships. I'll do a reading for the partner, and each partner, their shadow side, their positive light side, and then also the business doing the shadow side. What does a business look like if it was, you know, struggling or complicated, and what is it going to look like when it's in a positive place? So I kind of utilize a lot of those things, but you know, when I do it, I step into dimensions in privacy in my space, and I gather all this information. So the readings that I do, I take up to 2 to 3 hours prior to having a reading with somebody, because I'm channeling information. I'm sitting in my sacred space and getting as much information as possible, because I truly believe if you're going to have an hour session with me, I'd rather have my client have as much information as possible and get their money's worth for an hour and get as much information. And sometimes it's overwhelming because I give them so much, but that's also something that I do. And the other thing that I do is spiritual guidance. People who are wanting to know more about their talents, or maybe they've had dreams, or they've had visions or connections to Native American culture and they don't understand. So spiritual guidance is typically anything having to do with spirituality that they want to know more about. And, you know, I get those calls all the time and emails all the time. So those are some of the things. And I can adapt to anybody else's type of healing and specialize it, customize it for anybody. It's just up to the client of what they're needing at that particular time that I can create something for them.
Great. And guys, I'm going to include in the chat and also on the YouTube playback links to her website and also all of her social media, so you can book with her. I'm going to take some questions from the audience as well, but let's see here. First, I'm going to start off with, though, this one has to go, again, relating back with cultural appropriation, where online there has been some talk, quite a bit of talk about white sage and using white sage. And is it more so of buying white sage, or is it more the ritual of burning white sage that is considered disrespectful? And if that is the case, can people use white sage essential oils, white sage sprays? Like, where is it where we can be using it in a respectful way and not harm any, be ignorant about it?
Well, again, when it comes to any type of cultural connections with any type of medicines, you know, herbs or things like that, white sage is one of the most common things that a lot of people has used in the new age world. And it's everywhere. You can find it at many different places. It depends on who you talk to, who is saying it's inappropriate, not inappropriate. The main fact is, if you're using it with positive intentions for yourself, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, I may get backlash by other Native people who are saying, hey, that's not right, you shouldn't be supporting that. But you know what? My truth, your truth, everybody else has a truth, and it's all about intention. What energies you put behind the white sage, whatever you're doing, if it's coming from your heart, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But when it comes to harvesting it, that's a different story. So harvesting it, people say, is it more powerful? If it's mass produced, is it not powerful? You know, all those questions about that. Should I get it from only reputable Native people? The reason for really pushing to get it for Native people is because a lot of these Native people live on the reservations. That's the means of their income. And so it is always nice to put support towards people who it is in their culture. The way they harvest it is more appropriate. They're harvesting it at appropriate times. They're gathering it and bundling it in specific ways that are more appropriate to the traditional ways. So if you're wanting that for your own personal mind and heart to connect with, that's great, but there's also nothing wrong with non-natives who do harvest their own and they gather it in their own sacred way, because again, it's intention. If they're coming from a heart-centered place and they're harvesting it and they're wrapping it with love and light, then there's nothing wrong with that either, because I get those gifts all the time and I use them. I mean, I get the ones with, you get the white sage and roses and lavender. Would it be used in my traditional ceremonies? No, but I would use it in a way for my home to, you know, make it smell better, or, you know, intention with the lavender, bringing calmness. Maybe I've had a family member who's been ill, so I'll smudge and I'll use the lavender because lavender is healing and kills bacteria. So there are many, you know, properties that different herbs have for different things, but it is all intention. The thing that I caution the most is when it's harvested by non-natives, it can be wet and it can produce mold, black mold. So if it's mass produced and you're picking it up and it feels soft, you really want to break it open because it can have black mold. We've had people here in Arizona who are not from Arizona come in when they had their gem shows and selling a mass, huge amount of white sage, many different sizes, giant, little, all sorts of sizes, but they harvested it and they wrapped it when it was wet. And there was a lot of people who had bought in that white sage that had mold in it, and that is very toxic to the human body. And people were asking me, what should we do? Should we lay it out and dry and then use it? I was like, no, it's a black mold, throw it away. Unfortunately, you lost money on it, but always check the white sage to make sure it's dry and it's free of black mold, because otherwise you're going to cause respiratory issues with that black mold, and that ain't good. But it's all intention and it's all heart-centered. That's my opinion. Many other people will have different ones.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. And I feel like a lot of times it's also when we use any of these modalities, it's learning to respect it also by learning the history and where it came from, instead of just doing it because it's a new trend or someone said that it's a thing to do. We have a person on TikTok asking if you can also work distance instead of in person for your services.
Yes, I can do the energy work. I do defragmenting people. I can do that from here remotely. I've done visitations in hospitals. Because of COVID, they weren't at a certain period of time when it was really high peak. Nobody was going into the hospitals. I was always doing transition and different things like that. So I still do those things, but that's over Zoom when somebody's needing healing work. I've done things like that. The energy work, I can definitely do that remotely. But the shamanic session is the only one that must be done in person. I will not do that one over Zoom because it requires me actually working with the physical body and the aura. People can do it. I just choose not to. It's a little more safer for me. More so for me is the reason why I do it in person, because I have more control when it's in my own sacred space, because whatever I'm pulling off, I have control of it in my room. If I'm doing it remotely, I'm not in your space, and when things are coming off of you, you know, intention is everything, but when you're dealing with entities or different types of things, that is something you just don't want to take lightly. If there's major illnesses in somebody's body, you don't want to take that lightly either. So it's like saying, hey, can I have surgery through Zoom? Like somebody else is holding the tools. It's like, no, not for that, but for other things, minor things, you know, yeah, I can definitely do energy work. I've done galactic. I'm really into the starseed connection. And I've done galactic connections for people who are trying to understand that portion of themselves and opening up to cosmic energy. I do that over Zoom. So you'll find that one on my website as well.
Okay, and then let's see here. Someone's asking, I think this is back when you were explaining and touching on animals, that the spirits of animals, and are bears for family issues?
It depends on the family issue situation. But the bear energy can come up. Bear energy for me when I'm working with people is more with the way the mind thinks. So if you're having negative thinking, or you've had gone through mental abuse of some sort, that would something that the bear would come in that I've worked with. And bear energy is different for each practitioner. They all have different connections with their own animals and do things differently with animals. So I personally use that for that. And that's just something that's connected with my dad's side of the family. The bear medicine, the bear energy, that comes from my dad. So that's kind of what I use that for. But animals have their own way of basic healing, but also just like people, they can all do many different things. And depending on what you work with, I work with these animals consistently all the time in my work. And occasionally I'll have different animals pop in, but it's very rare. I work with the same ones because I do the same types of healings a lot. So I have those go-to animals.
And then, can you pull out the strings that created Chiron runes?
Yes, you can do that. I can do that through Zoom as well. Not very common, not very many people ask for that, but yeah, I can do that.
Then there's one question here on Zoom sent to me. How do you suggest that developing healers distinguish between clair abilities and shamanic vision or shamanic calling?
Shamanic calling would be somebody who has the deep connection of multiple dimensions, but also understands the humanness of people. So you can't be fully spiritual. You also have to understand the humanness of the way the human mind acts. Because if you have a person who's just so spiritual and wants to be engulfed in that shamanistic way, but not acknowledge the humanness of people, then there becomes an imbalance. You can easily lose yourself in those dimensions and live so much solely in a spiritual pathway. It's kind of confusing when I say that, but it's like a spiritual high. People can get stuck in the spiritual highness and be all about, I'm not going to make a choice. I'm always going to let spirit make the choice. I'm always going to have spirit tell me what to do. But a person who has a lot of master in their craft in shamanism will definitely understand that the humanness must come first before the spiritualness side comes and dictates what's necessary, or the depth of understanding after the fact. And there is a lot of people in the spiritual realm that people have that connection with spirituality, but they're only one-sided. Their pendulum swings to the light only, but never get engulfed into the dark energy of that. And you must understand both in order to work in those pathways. Because if you don't understand, then you can get lost in it, or you just won't be able to see those connections that people have.
And then another question from TikTok here. How does someone find a shaman?
Well, people who found me, Google was one, but then I also have people who have contracts with me. They have had dreams about me before they even saw my website. They have had my website stuck on their page for some reason, and they don't understand. They think it's a scam of some sort, but they contacted me and asked me, how can I get your website off of my page? I didn't click on it. And I'm like, what's going on with your life right now? Because there's a reason for it. And it's funny, but it's very common to have that happen with people. So to look for shaman, there is actually Institute of Shamanic Studies that does have a list of reputable shamans on their list, and they have to go through their program. I had gotten some training there a long time ago when I was really young, and they have this organization and stuff, but I didn't go through their full program. I didn't feel it was necessary for me. But there are non-natives who have training through this particular studies program, and they have requirements to take before they take certain classes, and they're required to do a 3-year program for them to do their practitioner work with their clientele, and then they report back at certain times of the year and continue their studies. So those type of medicine people who've gone through that program is really trying to bring the modalities, encompass it all, and try to do it the traditional ways, but in a modern way. And they required a lot of training. So those people who come through those programs are very reputable people, but you can find that on their websites. Me personally, I get a lot of people ask me, do I know? I personally don't seek out other medicine people. I personally stick to what I know. I'm known of some people, but I don't necessarily exchange medicine works with other medicine people, because for me, I have my own insecurities like everybody else. And, you know, when I first started bringing this out to non-natives, I was looking at what everybody else was doing, and, you know, I was having my own insecurities, but I learned to focus on me and not be distracted what everybody else is doing, and just do what's right for me. So I really don't really seek out other Indigenous people. And a lot of the medicine people out on my reservation, they're all male, and they don't want to have anything to do with me. So I don't send anybody to those people because they won't even have anything to do with me. So there are people out there. If you Google them, I recommend doing a lot of research on them. They should have a lot of, you don't know them, what they can do, ask them to send a referral of other clients that have gotten positive feedback, that to be able to share that experience with them. Because I do that with my clients. If somebody really wants more information, or, you know, wants to know how I've helped somebody, you know, I've asked certain clients, hey, I have somebody who wants to know more about the same, you know, they want to know more about the shaman, you know, healing technique of what I did. And it is an investment. And so they're not quick to want to invest so much into it and do it if it doesn't fit for them. So then I'll find somebody and ask them with their permission, would you mind, you know, having a conversation with somebody who's seeking the same services? And, you know, majority of them always say, sure, I don't mind sharing. So then they share their experiencing with that person, and that person will be able to say, okay, I would love to have the session. But my work has always been word of mouth. I don't solicit people. It's word of mouth. People find me, they look me up. They usually say there's something that resonates with them when they see my photograph. I try to put my photograph everywhere, because there is an energy exchange that people will see in my face, my eyes, the way I speak. Something connects with them. And there's that connection that people feel. And they may not even go to my website, but they hear a lecture and they're like, I need to speak with you. I need to get work from you. I don't know what, but could you guide me? This is what's going on. And that's usually just kind of how it happens. But I never go out soliciting anybody. I used to do psychic fairs, psychic events, and do those things. I don't do those things anymore. I do events, and I lecture. I do workshops, things like that. I go to events and we'll do the readings, but I don't do healing work anymore. Healing work is something that people who have contracts with me will find me and they will seek me out. The readings are for anybody, though. Those are something, it's just a door opening people can see.
And then we have just some time for just a few more questions. This one, obviously, you spoke about how you offer life purpose reading, but I guess this is someone on TikTok asking in general advice on how can a person find their purpose in life?
People will have this innate feeling, and this is what is so important, is knowing your foundational beliefs. Not the beliefs that were bestowed upon you when you were born, but these innate beliefs that you feel them in the core of your body. And it's usually right in the heart and right in your solar plex, there's a pulling energy. And a lot of times it starts to get activated when you're doing something that's not in alignment with you. And it starts to pull you into having you think of ideas, or having thoughts about a different job or a different career. And a lot of times people think, well, I keep going from job to job and I can't make up my mind. I'm like, no, that's perfect, because this is what you picked up from this job. This is what you picked up from that job. And it's all leading up to the job that you were meant to do. So some people feel like, well, I'm not doing my purpose because I keep going from job to job to job. I said, no, you're picking up your tools and you're going to that position to where you're fulfilling that purpose. But you'll feel it within yourself. It is something that locks in, and it just feels very natural. It's a natural feeling that you do that a lot of times you're not even aware that you're doing it. And so a lot of these readings, when I read for people, it's a lot of validation. That's why I do this. This is why I do that. I'm like, yeah, this is why you get irritated with people, is because you have this purpose to fulfill and you're at the wrong job. But yet part of that job is fulfilling. And that's the stepping stone that's getting you to do that life purpose. So somebody who's extremely heart-centered and feels a need that they're have these psychic abilities, they may be mediums, clairvoyant, all these different gifts. You don't have to be metaphysical and be a card reader or to do healing work. You can take this type of intuitive stuff, these gifts and talents, and be in government and make changes. You can be an environmentalist. You can be working in healthcare systems and making changes. You can be that receptionist at the front who easily knows what you need, or especially, I love intuitive nurses who have the intuitiveness. I want a spiritual nurse in there because she automatically knows when I'm in pain, when I can't speak, or I need something, and she's right there because she just knows. So we want all these spiritual people in these different human jobs that have their gifts and talents that they could utilize. Even marketing, you got intuitive and knowing people how to market things. And so these talents don't necessarily have to be to where you have to be a medium, or you have to be a tarot reader, you have to be an energy worker. You can utilize all these talents. And that's what my life purpose reading helps you to understand, is that you don't have to be the reader and go to psychic fairs and do those things. You can do this in a bigger scheme of government, changing laws, being an environmentalist, working in the healthcare systems, working as a mechanic. You get all these different types of people who don't realize that they're tapping into. And these intuitive gifts are not just right side of the brain either. I get a lot of people who are spiritual people that are left-brained. And so I don't talk to them in the woo-woo sense. I talk to them from the scientific sense. So these engineers and logical people, architects who I connect with and give them a life purpose reading or give them readings, it is something that gravitates to them. And usually those types of people, or my website gets stuck on their page. They would never go into the spiritual realm to seek me out. They want to know why I'm stuck on there and I'm spamming them, which I'm not. But a lot of times those are just the reasons why those things happen. So life purpose is just a fulfilling of the soul aspect of your talents and gifts and utilizing them and getting out of your own way. So if you can get out of your own way, your life purpose will open up to you very quickly.
I remember a quote that I really liked. It was, you don't find your passion, you develop it. Yes. And I think that's kind of what you encapsulated, but we don't realize that until we get much older and look back and see how it all connects. There's some lovely comments I'd like for you to hear. Someone said, I think I'm getting a heart healing. Something is happening. I think that's from watching you speak. Davina here says, you're speaking to my soul. Allison says, thank you. Exactly what I need to hear.
That's one of the things that my soul purpose is to empower people. You know, I'm the cheerleader from the spiritual side. I'm the one here that can support you and say, hey, be your authentic self. Don't follow, lead, and do it in the best way possible. You gravitate to Indigenous culture and you want to put a feather in your hair, wear turquoise, you want to sage and smudge and call yourself a shaman, then you must own it first in your heart and have no resistance to it and just being yourself. Will there be people who don't like you? Yes. Will people be upset and say, you know, other Indigenous people say negative things to you? Absolutely. But the fact is, it doesn't matter. If you're happy with who you are and you're happy with what you're doing, there's nothing wrong with that. And I encourage a lot of people to own who they are, because that's what I did. You know, I've took my own journey in healing in my, and if a healer is not consistently doing healing work on themselves, then they're not a true healer, because you know, nobody's perfect. Even for myself, I'm consistently working on myself all the time. These readings were developed first with myself because I'm seeking answers. I'm not going outside of me for seek answers for anybody else. I'm seeking answers within myself. And I developed some of these different techniques and I put them out there. The shadow reading was evolved this year because I was doing shadow work. I was in a bad car accident and I wanted to know why. Spiritually, just like I was raised with, everything happens for a reason, so I'm seeking it out spiritually. But I was stubborn and frustrated and I needed something to show me in my face, so I developed a reading for myself. And then all of a sudden it's like, I wonder if this would be beneficial to other people. So I did, you know, a special and simply said, hey, who wants to try this? I just developed this. You want to try? And it was very successful. So it's one of my most common ones this year that I started utilizing. Life purpose, you know, we go through different changes throughout our time periods in our life, and the purpose we think changes and evolves over time. So even for myself, my work has changed over the years, and I'm actually in a transition period right now to where I'm evolving into who I'm going to be. And, you know, I'm human, I'm frustrated. I want to know now, tell me the destination so I can be less stressful and not overwhelm myself. But again, everything comes in at appropriate time. And the most important thing is we are always right where we're supposed to be. Even when we don't feel like we're right there, we're always right where we're supposed to be. So it's so important to be in the present moment now.
I think that your journey of self-discovery, always wanting to be growing and evolving, also the hardships that you've been through, really allow you to speak in a way that resonates with a lot of people and be able to understand them when they come to you for what you've been through too, which is how I think great healers are born as well. I think, okay, I'm gonna take one more question here. Does she recommend ayahuasca retreats?
No, I don't. I have my own personal opinion on it. If it's not with a trained person, somebody's trained, meaning a watcher is going to be there and watch with you for the next few days. Even if you go out of the country and come back, you must have somebody in the United States who you're comfortable with in case something psychologically happens to you, who is metaphysical, who can help you through that journey. I get a lot of people who take that journey to Peru, come back, and they're psychologically not prepared for what is happening, or the group that they went with did not prepare them properly, and they came back and they've had psychic breaks, and people want me to unclose the door. They want that door closed again, and I told them, once the door has been open, you can't close that door again. You can minimize that, but it's like saying, you know, I wish I never tasted chocolate. Well, once you taste it, you can't ever get that pattern out of your mouth. You know what that tastes like. So I don't recommend it for just anybody. You must understand and develop a personal relationship with a person who is doing that type of work for you. if you don't know them or you're just going on a retreat, there can be some psychological breaks, and I have seen a lot of those. There are those groups though who have gone and nothing has happened either, and they've had some great breakthroughs, but that's only because they were ready. Those types of people had done their research and actually talked to other people who've gone through it before them, and usually went there with somebody who's done it before. So it is something that is not to be taken lightly, and not to really do that. So the ayahuasca and the peyote are the two things that I don't recommend just to experience it on a whim. This is something that you must prepare yourself prior to doing the ceremony, and then have the support system to caretake for you after you're done and you get back, because it is breaking the psyche open to see the things and reveal things to you that have been hidden. And you may start remembering things that you didn't remember before, that was so traumatic to you, has now disrupted your life, and it can destroy marriages and relationships. It can destroy your career. It can destroy your relationships with people and cause you to isolate and not want to connect with the world again. And it can lead into substance abuse for people to numb what they're feeling. So it isn't something to take very lightly. It is to take with extreme caution both of those substances, and to make sure you know those people are very reputable and trained, and you know who they are. That's one of my cautions.
Okay, and then finally, to wrap up this event, what is something you wish the world knew about you? What is something you wish people watching in right now you could tell them, or even if they watch in the future on YouTube?
What I want people to know is what brought you to here tonight to see me and connect with me, and what you're resonating with me is exactly what's inside you. When people come to me and they see me for the light that's in me, the wisdom that I share, the knowledge that I share, it is all within yourselves. I'm just a mirror. I'm just here to reflect that mirror to you. And what you see in me is exactly what you can bring out within yourself. You just have to be the one to believe it.
And then I want to read a comment here. De Alva is so amazing, blown away. Thank you so much, truly amazing. Thank you for being real. And then finally, where can people find you? What is your website where people can book for you? I know someone here was asking for available dates, but I'll put down below her website so you can check her out. And where can people find you on social media?
Earth Mother Wisdom is where you can find me on Facebook, everywhere, Instagram, Earth Mother Wisdom. TikTok is Modern Hopi Shaman. My YouTube channel is De Alva Ward. You can find me on there. I have some videos that are up. One of them is a very popular video with Hopi prophecy in there, where I speak to people, and it does have a meditation at the end, but it gets cut off at the very end when it peaks through the meditation. So Spirit didn't want that part to take place. But for the most part, a lot of people gravitate to that one. There are some other videos that I have up there, but you can contact me through earthmotherwisdom.com. I have email connected to that. And right now, I'm not doing any shaman work right now due to COVID. I'm hoping to do that next year after the springtime. But for right now, I can do the long distance energy work over. I usually do the energy work and stuff over the phone, because I put the earbuds in, and then my clients can put their earbuds in and they can hear my voice in the guided meditations and in the healing work that I'm doing. And I can talk to them and tell them what I'm feeling on their body and that experiences. So that's how I can do that. The readings are all done through Zoom, or if they choose to just do it over the phone. So you can contact me that way. Usually email is the best way to connect with me, because I get back to you, because time zone's different for a lot of people. So email would be the best way to contact me, and we can talk about what type of type of reading or healing work, or if you just simply want to connect and share your story or get some insights to something, I'm definitely open. And like I said, it's just, I'm human just like everybody else, and I don't really put myself out there as this all medicine person. I'm just your average silly clumsy woman and loves to laugh and do other things. So yeah, I'm here to share my story, and that's how I teach as I evolve through my own journeys. And Facebook is the one where I share the most my personal journeys, my struggles, difficulties in life, things like that. So I share a lot there, but I try to put them out everywhere as much as I can.
Thank you so much. Everyone, I put all her information right there in the chat. Anyone that's watching it on Instagram or TikTok, again, check out Earth Mother Wisdom. And then Maria just shot me a little quick message saying there's over 600 likes for her live on TikTok right now. So I'm glad so many people were able to tune in for such a wonderful event. And I feel like it's such a treat to have you come on. So thank you. So I'm so grateful, and I'm glad we connected prior, and we connected really well on our previous, before this event, the Zoom session.
Yes.
So yes. So again, thank you so much. And I hope everyone took away a lot of good things tonight. Other than that, don't forget to check out our next month's event where we teach about Reiki healing energy and spiritual coaching with Maria. Maria right here wrote, incredibly humbled and honored to have you here, De Alva.
Thank you all for having me, and thank you all for tuning in. And thank you for celebrating Indigenous Month this month. I'm very proud of you and your business being able to support something like this. It's not seen very often, and I'm so glad that you reached out to me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Coming from a minority background, and there's a lot of lack of diversity, it's really important to be represented. You know, I wish we saw that more, and hopefully in the future this will be a norm for a lot of companies and businesses.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
Yeah. Thanks everyone. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.